Hello and welcome to another pen video from me, Penultimate Dave. So today I have another inks comparison video, and this is KWZ Inks Comparison number 2. So I think with that, let's swap up some of these inks. So I get a lot of questions on how I do these ink videos. So I decided I would add this to the front of each of the ink videos. I put links in the description, but I know some of you watch this on TVs or mobile devices, so you don't get to see this. So first off, the paper is the number one question I get asked. What paper do I use for these ink comparison videos? So this is the original Tomoe River. This is 52 GSM, and it is the white, not the cream, the white. Where possible, I try to go for the white because the cream can actually change the color of the ink just a little bit. So this is Tomoe River 52 GSM in the white. A lot of people get confused as well because I have what looks to be a grid on this page, and it's actually an Oxford Optik pad. These are the pads that I actually use when I'm writing my writing samples for pen reviews or in my currently ink. So they have these little squares up here. I just use that because it's a good guide for me when I put this very thin sheet of Tomoe River over. I can actually see squares, so it helps me write a little bit sort of straight on the page. Not always, but sometimes it does. The other thing that I also have is I have a bottle of water, plain water, and I dip my nib in here. So for consistency, I use the same fountain pen, or I guess it's not a fountain pen, it's using a fountain pen nib though. This is a 3D printed pen from William Shakour in the UK. So he prints this material 3D, and it has a number 8 size Bock nib which I can unscrew, and you can see there. So it is just a dip pen holder for a number 8 size Bock nib, and the idea is I want to have consistency with the writing sample. So I use this, I dip it in the ink, I write, and then I will dip it in here, and I will rinse the nib off several times, and I will dry it, and then at that point I will then go on to do the next ink swatch and the next writing sample. So there you have it. That's how I do my ink swatches. So I just wanted to show you that here. Now on to the ink comparison video. So the first ink here is a UK pen show exclusive. It's actually a Newcastle pen show exclusive, and this is called Newky Brown, and this is a beautiful brown ink. Now, if you don't know, Newky is short for Newcastle, and Newcastle has a number of drinks available to its name. One of them is Newcastle Brown Ale, and this is exactly what the Newcastle Brown Ale sort of logo looks like. But it's also known not only as Newcastle Brown Ale, but Newky Brown Ale for short. So this ink has been named after that famous Newcastle Brown Ale drink, and I have to say the colour looks really inviting. So we'll do an ink swatch here, and this is a beautiful brown ink. I want to say it's a darker brown, but as you see here, as it becomes a little bit drier, it does become a lot lighter. Now we'll do a second pass over the top half just to show the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib. So this is KWZ, and it is Newky Brown. And that is a really beautiful brown ink. Depending on whether or not you're going to have it in a wet or a dry writing nib, or maybe a narrow or a broad writing nib. The next ink is KWZ and its Thiefs Red. So we'll do another ink swatch here, and you'll see that this is a very bright, punchy red. And I have to say that The drier it becomes, further on down is more like a strawberry colour, I would say. Now we'll do a second pass over the top half just to show the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib, or a broader and a narrow writing nib. So this is KWZ, and it is Thiefs Red, which for me is actually a really nice red ink. And again, this is another KWZ ink where I've actually used almost about half a bottle's worth. I haven't actually inked it up more recently. I think I'm going to have to do so. The next KWZ ink is KWZ Old Gold. So we'll do an ink swatch here. Now this for me really is a beautiful gold colour. If you are looking, like I was a number of years ago, for a gold coloured ink that didn't have shimmer in it, then this is probably the ink for you. We'll do a second pass over the top here, show the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib, or a broad and a narrow writing nib. So this is KWZ, and it is Old Gold. But that is a really beautiful gold ink. It dries a lot differently than when it is wet. Now, the fourth ink here, I did actually show on the KWZ Inks Comparison #1 video. However, I wanted, and I know a number of people have asked me, what the difference in colour is between KWZ Old Gold and KWZ Honey. So let's swab up this ink. So you'll see here that this is an interesting brown colour, a honey colour, almost like a honey nectar. Now I will just do a second pass over the top just to show the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib, or a broad and a narrow writing nib. So this is KWZ, and it is Honey. But this is a really, really beautiful colour ink. So I think let's now take a look at these inks now that they have dried a little. So the first ink here is the UK Pen Show exclusive, more so the Newcastle Pen Show exclusive, and this is the KWZ Newky Brown, or Newcastle Brown, named after the Newcastle Brown Ale or Newky Brown Ale, depending on what you would call it if you're British. This is a really beautiful brown colour, and you can see a really difference here in the contrast between what would be a wet or a wide writing nib and a dry or a narrow writing nib. That in a wet or wide writing nib is going to be very darker brown. If it's in a narrow or a dry writing nib, it's going to be quite a light golden brown colour. You can see here, obviously, the writing sample there is a wet writing nib. Now, do you see any shading? Yes, I do. I do see some shading going on, a little bit here on the light, but also typically around the dark here, it goes almost to a black at one point. Now, the other interesting thing here is that it does have sheen on it as well. Again, around the pooled areas of the ink, but you will hopefully see some sheen there on camera. So that is again another KWZ ink that has sheen. Now, I've seen sheen on KWZ Grapefruit before. I've seen it on KWZ Honey, Beefeater Red as well, and also Gummy Berry. So it's interesting to see that KWZ do have some sheening inks. They do have some very super high concentrated dye sheening inks, like Diamine do as well, like the Sheen Machine ink. I don't actually have that, and I keep thinking I need to get a bottle of that, so possibly I'll pick that up at the next pen show. The next ink here is KWZ Thiefs Red. Can I see a difference between a wet or broad writing nib, or a dry or narrow writing nib? Yes, I definitely can. The dry or narrow writing nib would be a lot lighter, almost like a strawberry red colour, a pastel colour. The writing sample, though, because it was a wet writing nib, because I dipped the nib, you'll see there that it is a darker red. There is some shading going on. You can see it here in the lighter patches, also in the darker patches as well. And can you see any sheen on this one? Yes, you can. It's got a beautiful gold sheen there, again around the pulled areas of the ink. A beautiful, beautiful sheen. So it's not over the top like some sheen monster inks, but it's still pretty nice. Now, the next ink here is KWZ Old Gold, and this is a favourite of mine. The ink swatch looks very different to what the writing sample does. And I have to say, when I've looked at ink swatches online, I have looked at it and thought, that's not Old Gold, but it is. So the ink swatch will look very, very different. The writing sample really does look like gold colour without any shimmer or particulate. So it is a really nice ink. Can you see the difference between a wet or broad writing nib and a dry or narrow writing nib? There isn't a huge amount of difference. Like, you might see it a little bit down here more, that there is a much lighter golder colour there. But typically it's pretty much uniform over most of it, apart from some of the pulled areas where it will go a little bit more darker brown, or darker gold, I should say. Now, what you will see, and it's very hard to see, I'll try and get it on camera, but around this darkened area there is a bit of sheen there as well. Not a lot, and maybe there is, I'd say maybe a film of sheen across some of these areas here. It's very, very subtle though. You probably wouldn't notice it unless somebody pointed it out to you. But there is a little bit of sheen there coming out of that ink. So the next ink here is KWZ Honey, and I've had a number of people asking me, what is the difference between KWZ Old Gold and KWZ Honey? So I wanted to actually show these two inks side by side so that you could actually have a look yourself, because for me, and a lot of people, a lot of the online swatches for both of these inks look fairly identical. So sometimes it's a little bit difficult to understand the difference. So KWZ Old Gold is I'd say certainly a golder colour ink. It's a lighter colour. KWZ Honey is more of a darker, richer honey colour, like a honey nectar. Now, you can get this lighter honey nectar colour here in what would be the dry or narrow writing nib. The wetter or broader writing nib is certainly a lot more darker, and you can see that here from the writing sample that I've used the same nib effectively and same pen dipped in each of these inks, and that has come out a huge amount different there. So a wet writing nib, it will come out a really dark brown instead of a lighter brown, but this is a really nice coloured ink. So you can see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib. There is some shading that goes on with this ink. I do find it a lot when I'm writing, even with a wet writing nib. The other thing I'm going to try and show you here, there is some sheen, certainly around these pulled areas here. There is some sheen going on, and it's not a lot, but it's certainly more than KWZ Old Gold, I would say. There's quite a lot of sheen there. So it will sheen. It is a sheening ink. So if you are looking for a brown ink that does have an element of sheen to it, then certainly check out KWZ Honey. I typically find that this does shade very well, although you're not really seeing it much there in the writing sample on this sample here. But normally when I'm writing letters with it on Tomoe River, I do find that this ink really shades very well. So that's my KWZ Inks Comparison number 2 video. If there are any of these inks that you like, do let me know in the comments below. Likewise, if there are any other KWZ inks that you think I should try out that I may like, then do let me know in the comments below. I do want to try more KWZ inks. I don't have a huge amount of KWZ inks in my collection. I would like to actually do some more KWZ ink comparison videos. So we'll see if I do add some more over time, and maybe I can do a few more videos here. So that's my KWZ Inks Comparison number 2 video. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next pen video. Bye bye.